Everyone. My name is Clint Carroll. I am an assistant professor here at CU Boulder in the Department of Ethnic Studies. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I teach American Indian Studies. Barbara Duncan could not be here today, so I have the honor of reading her paper, so I'll do my best to channel Barbara. She's a friend of mine. She's also my teacher. I'm a student of this program that she and John Standing Deer have developed. And so it's really an honor to be asked to read her paper. I want to read Barbara's intro because although she's not Cherokee, she has deep ties and relationships with the Eastern Band, and she has just made amazing strides in learning the language, and you'll hear about her story in a minute. And so it may sound weird for those Cherokee speakers out there, if there are any, that I'm reading her intro, but again, in the spirit of being a medium for Barbara, here we go. Aya jisquaya da wada'a chalakad, Barbara Duncan, yonegad. Sudalsko sudali, iagudetiada. Tal iani, din yotle agikaha, nole jo iani jiganleisi. Ueti chalaki, Gaduni Ginela, Nole Ueti Chalaki, Junes Guan go doti, Dagilons Dane Hoi. Kristen Carpenter, Gayali Haley Jeha. Nole Agweji, Askaya John, Gayali Haley Jeha. Oginali, Gatni, Awikatoga, Gayali Jeha. To translate, I'm Barbara Duncan, as I'm called in English. For those of you just arriving, I'm actually not Barbara Duncan. I'm 66 and I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. I live in the old Cherokee country in Franklin, North Carolina. I work at the Museum of the Cherokee Indian. I'm thankful to Kristen Carpenter for inviting me here, and I'm also thankful to my son John for helping me drive. I'm thankful to my friend and colleague Bullet Standing Deer. I'm going to read in the first person, so please bear with me. I want to talk about a new method for understanding and learning and teaching the Cherokee language that I've worked on with John Standing Deer, a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. He's going to talk to you in a few minutes. He and I work within the community of the Eastern Band. He is on a surveying crew, and I work at the Museum of the Cherokee Indian, a nonprofit organization. Outside of our jobs, we have worked for the past 12 years without pay on the Cherokee language. As a result, with our colleague Susan Ryman-Snyder, we have created a new method for understanding the Cherokee language, as well as a website, a dictionary with more than 80,000 words, a patent, and a sequence of 4 courses with textbooks that I have been teaching at the University of North Carolina in Asheville during the evenings. Our courses have included a pilot project with members of the Eastern Band, meeting in the evenings for the past 6 years, a small class that met in Cherokee for 3 days and continued via Skype with members of the Cherokee Nation, and I was a part of that kind of guinea pig run there at the beginning. I was really honored to be a part of it. Online and Skype classes, undergraduate classes at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, and adult leadership classes for members of the Eastern Band. I had tried to learn Cherokee for 20 years. I read all the books, listened to the tapes and CDs, and had Cherokee friends who tried to teach me. We sang songs in Cherokee, but I didn't know what I was singing. I learned the colors, numbers, animals, the nouns. I learned to write syllabary, but I still couldn't speak Cherokee. Here's one of the problems. The problem was learning the long words, what some people call the Cherokee verbs. These are like a complete sentence in English. People call this a polysynthetic language, a term coined in the early 1800s by Stephen Duponceau. For example, Dagilams taneha, I am working. I could cram one long word into my memory, but when I asked fluent speakers how to change that word to he or she is working, or I will work, or I worked in the past at one point in time, they couldn't tell me how to do that. They could only give me another long multisyllabic word like du lance taneha, he or she is working. Do dagi lance taneha, I will work. Dagi lance taneha ki, I worked at one point in time, and I was there and witnessed the action. Likewise, the linguistic scholars could not explain to me how to change the words. Their method for breaking down phonemes and morphemes can work if you study linguistics at the graduate level, but their approach is academic, focused on documentation and analysis of language rather than helping people learn to speak. So in the fall of 2006, Gotne Bullet Standing Deer said to me, if the Cherokee people have spoken this language for 4,000 years, there has to be a pattern, and it has to be simple and easy. The words simple and easy and Cherokee language are not usually found in the same sentence. Cherokee is considered one of the most difficult languages in the world for English speakers to learn. Not only is it a polysynthetic language, it has its own writing system, invented by Sequoyah in 1821. And Cherokee is an endangered language. Among the 16,000 members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians who live on a small part of their ancestral homelands in the mountains of North Carolina, only about 200 grew up speaking the language. They are considered fluent speakers today, but they're all more than 60 years of age. In Oklahoma, where the Cherokee Nation and United Keetoowah Band live, they say there are several thousand fluent speakers. The intergenerational chain of transmission has been broken, and although all three federally recognized tribes are making efforts, Cherokee is still a difficult language for English speakers to learn. We have solved one part of that problem by finding a way to understand and use the long polysynthetic words that are the heart of the language, the Cherokee verbs as they are called. When students can use these words, they can begin to converse with native speakers, the ones who grew up speaking the language. When Bullitt said there had to be a pattern, we began looking. To make a long story short, we found it. Every one of those long polysynthetic words has an underlying pattern, and the pattern is the same for every word. It's like a math equation. We read dissertations by linguists, manuscripts from archives, books about Cherokee culture, and sources from the early 1800s. We talked with fluent speakers. And about after a year, we found that the underlying pattern of Cherokee words could be described in a one-page chart. We called this the grandmother chart because in Cherokee, the word for grandmother means she will pick me up and carry me. And this chart carries us to an understanding of the language. What we found is that every long Cherokee word has four essential parts. Who is doing the action, what is happening, how the action is happening, and when it is happening. Prefixes and suffixes provide additional information, including plurals, direction of the action, and so on. Other scholars have looked at similar structures but didn't find the regular patterns as we have. We did not use terminology from English grammar or from linguistics. We kept our terminology as simple as possible for several reasons. We wanted to make this easy for everyone to use, and we wanted to be accurate with the Cherokee language. Many terms from English grammar and from linguistics are not accurate in describing Cherokee parts of speech. For example, the English terms transitive and intransitive do not apply precisely to Cherokee verbs. There are many exceptions. When we created the grandmother chart, we checked our results with speakers. Because we were using the full forms of the words in order to see the patterns, many of the words came from older sources. And so speakers said, I haven't heard that word since my grandmother used it. So we called this approach your grandmother's Cherokee. In the who column, you have the 10 active people, which are the same for hundreds of verb roots. Let's see if I can. So the who column here, and these are the English translations or the English equivalents. This is one of the ways we differ from other scholars in that we have discerned the patterns that make these very consistent from word to word. If you learn these 10, you can apply them to hundreds of verb roots. In the what column, you have the one consistent verb root, and it's blank here because this is a chart that's supposed to be applicable to all of the Cherokee verbs. Again, we differ from other scholars in that we see the patterns within Cherokee words that make this regular. Other scholars say that each verb has 5 different roots that must be memorized. We see the Cherokee pattern that makes this consistent for every verb. In the how column, you have a sound that carries from tense to tense but can be predicted based on patterns within the patterns. In the when column, you have only 7 possibilities that are used on every verb root. Again, this is based on discerning Cherokee patterns in the words. The parts of the word can be separated so that the parts are extremely regular. We use this format to make a matrix for each verb root. And this is one for be somewhere, e do. The matrix shows the 12 tenses commonly used by speakers today. Using the same columns, the same patterns as the grandmother chart, we created worksheets that students can use to practice conjugating polysynthetic words. So the matrix is one word out of many that can be conjugated using the grandmother chart. And the student worksheet is based on one tense from the matrix. Students practice making this tense with all 10 people. We give them the breakdown of each verb root so that the patterns are consistent. Students don't have to memorize each long polysynthetic word. And I think that is key. It turns from what I've heard people say as a phraseology into an actual structured, what I call it, a language that displays its inherent indigenous logic. Many linguists break down words seeking the smallest parts with meaning, the morphemes. They follow, as scholars do, previous analyses and try to add their own contribution. Their focus has not necessarily been on seeking indigenous patterns or ethno-linguistic categories. What we have done, following the idea of finding the pattern, is to find the simplest pattern, the most consistent pattern, which is in fact there in Cherokee words. So why is this important? Seeing these inherent indigenous patterns in this language has made several things possible. The patterns in Cherokee are so logical and consistent that words can be programmed to be conjugated using a computer or a program. These logical patterns also make it possible for students to become fluent. They can learn the Cherokee language because they can conjugate Cherokee verbs, the long polysynthetic words, equal to a sentence in English. Seeing the patterns gives us an appreciation of the structure of the language. In addition, seeing these patterns has enabled us to see similar patterns in other indigenous languages. And finally, by focusing on the patterns inherent in the language itself, we are avoiding a Eurocentric, colonized approach. We found that the patterns of the words are so logical, consistent, and predictable that the conjugations of Cherokee verbs can be programmed with a computer. Working with Susan Ryman-Snyder, her sister, we did this and received a patent for this software. To our knowledge, no other language is consistent and logical enough to be programmed and conjugated in this way. And this is just I know it's really fine print, but the output for looking at the word go in the first person. So who, you see, is I. Yes, the action is happening in the present. When, and so when you input this in on their website, it can do this with many different verbs, these word sentences, as they call them. Being able to conjugate the words and create a database is the foundation of our website at yourgrandmother'scherokee.com, which went live in 2013. The website includes a dictionary with more than 80,000 words, and they're fully conjugated forms and ready to use. It is searchable using an English word or a Cherokee word, or phonetics in the Cherokee syllabary. For example, you can look up the word sentence for he, she, or I went somewhere, or did not go somewhere. The dictionary is not yet complete, but has complete conjugations for all the people and tenses for more than 150 verb roots out of a possible 800 verb roots. The website also includes a user-friendly form called Make a Word, where you can construct these polysynthetic words by choosing their parts. The website includes online courses at 4 levels, with interactive student worksheets and dialogues on YouTube where students can repeat after fluent speakers. So learning in this way, students are able to conjugate these long polysynthetic words that are equal to a sentence in English. Sometimes these words seem to change very differently on the surface, but it is with this method students can see the relationship, for example, between agaska, it is raining, and daganani, it will rain, 2 words that sound very different. at face value. When students learn one verb group, one tense, they can immediately make 10 word sentences of different people. For example, I am going, you and I are going, you all and I are going, he, she, and I are going, they and I are going, you, one person are going, you, two people are going, you all are going, he, she, or it is going, and they are going. Those are all the tense, or the persons, if you will. Students also learn the larger patterns that predict how to change verb tenses. So when they learn a new word that ends in ga, for example, they immediately know how to make all 120 forms of the word for the 10 different people in 12 tenses. Because we have analyzed all these words and realized that they conjugate the same, again, that pattern. But it still takes work, obviously. Students still have to practice pronunciation, and usually in conversation with fluent speakers. They have to practice speaking. The State Department and linguists say that it takes about 4,000 hours to become fluent in a language, and so it still takes a lot of work. So I need to skip ahead because I'm out of time. But when we initially saw the patterns of Cherokee language, we were amazed. We kept wondering, why has no one seen this? Because it seems so simple and so obvious. We kept wondering, who made this? Because it seemed so perfectly constructed. Bullitt said it was like a flower where every part has its purpose. As we continued looking at resources and manuscripts from the early 1800s, we found a quote from Stephen Duponceau, the first head of the American Philosophical Society, and he wrote that the American Indian languages in general are rich in words and in grammatical forms, and that their complicated construction, the greatest order, method, and regularity prevail. This seems to describe the patterns we were seeing. He went on to say that these complicated forms, which I call polysynthetic, appear to exist in all those languages from Greenland to Cape Horn, and that these forms appear to differ essentially from those of the ancient and modern languages of the Old Hemisphere. In conclusion, Indigenous languages are important for many reasons, which others have shared. We have found that they are also important because they have a structure that is logical and consistent, that has not been noted before. Recognizing this structure recognizes the intellectual achievements of Indigenous languages. It also can make them easier to learn and can make it possible for technology to assist in this process. Well, no, thank you.
Shio. Ani, Zani, Awigadoga. I use these words right here now in my introduction. I'm John Standing Deer. They call me Gani, call me Bullet. My mother is Mary Elizabeth French, full Cherokee. My father, John Standing Deer Sr. I am John Standing Deer Jr. As I stand here, as I was growing, I grew up just a human being. When I was in the second grade or so, I used to have to write my name. I did not grow up as a speaker. I didn't hear it much. And so when I went to school, my name's John Calvin Standing Deer Jr. I'd write my name on this, across my paper. My name was long, so it came across the top, went down the side. And I don't know why, one day, as we grow, our mind changes. We see and understand different things. But I realized, I said, we were talking, I see my name, and I don't know what happened. Lightning struck, thunder, I don't know. But I went home that day, got off the school bus and ran into the house. I said, Mom, Mom, Mom. She said, what is it, son? I said, Mom, I'm an Indian. She said, yes, son, you are. I said, I like Three Stooges in the morning, you know. And I would go hunt with my uncles, go fishing with my uncles, you know, got a garden every year, go up in the woods and gather plants, things that I just thought was what we did, the normal, what some people would call traditional. But it was just life. And I said, Mom, I said, my name is Standing Deer. She said, yes, son, it is. I said, Mom, It's a good name, huh? She said, yes, son, it's a good name. I guess that day I became Indian. Now, as I grew and got older and grown, went to school, I didn't hear the language much, as I say. Of course, everybody had come through it. My uncles are all in the military. I had 13 uncles. They all went to the military. I started letting my hair grow when I was 18. Now, we're talking about this indigenous rights, but we also have to talk about awareness and change and understanding in our perception. The Cherokees are called one of the 5 civilized tribes, meaning we adapted very rapidly. So when I started letting my hair grow out, my uncles teased me because they'd been to the military. They all had a GI cut, and they would call me girl or sissy. Very Cherokee way of not saying you're wrong, but trying to guide me in a different way. And for whatever reason, I seen my hair as part of my Indianness. And that's why I wanted it. I never told them that. And I would never disrespect my uncles. I was always told to respect the elders. But life goes on, continued going on. I did not really have an interest in the language because I did not hear it spoken. And someone even asked me, they said, why does it not matter to you? And I said, nobody's speaking it. Who would I talk to? But in my life, I've always been, again, goes back to that name. We would go when we would have ceremonies, dances. I started doing my Cherokee dances when I was 9 years old. I would hear and understand. Sometimes the older men would use the language at that time. And of course, someone would tell me, this is what's going on, this is what they're saying this. And when you grow up in it, you just know what's happening. And so I belong with the group that we go and we represent our tribe. And I got chosen and picked as one as a cultural ambassador because of dancing all my life. I was taught by a man named Richard Crow, and I knew him as a traditionalist, spoke the language. Sometimes he would say to us when we were young, he'd say, boys, ski stay la. I'm saying, help me. And so you would hear bits and pieces. So I got to know some of the words. Kena, come here. Hadi. They said that means don't or stop. But still, it didn't hit me. And then there began to be talk about the language. And what I realized is that we'd had classes in the Cherokee language since 1970. And still the language kept dying, kept eroding. And again, I thought, well, nobody's speaking it. And so when I got into this group, because I was dancing, because they said, you know the history? Will you do this? Will you represent us? I said, yes, anything for the people. So that's how I got introduced and came into this group. And we began to talk about the language. And we said, we need to know more about this. All of us are young, all of us were under 60, and the cutoff line was about 55 at that time of speakers, fluent speakers. And so we got into that, and we all took a class, and I didn't like that class. I didn't understand it. It did not help me. It did not give me anything. I got lucky. I worked with 2 men who were fluent speakers. One man's name was Richard Smoker. Another man's name was Wiggins Black Fox. Very old traditional name. We got to talking, and we would talk about the language. And as I was looking, I talked to Wiggins, and we were closer in age. And I said, there's something wrong. I said, too many people have spoke this language for so long. I said, how can it be so difficult now? I said, no. I said, the linguists have been here, we've had the books, we've had the speakers teaching. They will give you the word, they say it means this, but it wasn't like the English. They couldn't tell you the ED, the ING, they couldn't tell you any of that, just say this big long word. So I said, wow, this is really difficult. So I did this 10-day immersion, and as I said, I didn't like it. And so I sat still, and I started thinking about the language. I did not really mean and I intend to get into this as deep as I did, but I wanted to understand. I was looking at the syllabary chart, and I realized something as I was looking at it, which I'd been looking at it for a year, because I dropped everything. After taking that immersion class, I just threw it all away. And that difficult and hard, yeah, it was big, Paramount. It was bigger than any mountain we have at home. Bigger than these mountains out here. These are big mountains. And so what I did was sit there and I began to realize something. Now, hadn't read the dissertations or the books, so I didn't know. And what I realized was that in that syllabary chart that we use, that there were a representation of vowels, representation of consonant and vowel, but no representation of consonants alone. So, and I knew that it was really hard to read the syllabary. It takes a lot of study and it's hard work. There's 85 symbols. And then what I realized as I was looking at this, I thought, if I take this symbol for da and make it represent the D sound and combine it with a symbol that's for the ah sound, I got da. Suddenly I had an alphabet, a complete full alphabet, which where a lot of people, most people had not learned the syllabary. You as someone want to learn, you could learn to write like this with this alphabet in one day. I thought, oh, cool. I didn't know I had done something very sacrilegious. I'd went against the great Sequoia. I didn't realize that. I just thought I was looking for a better way to help me and anybody else understand and learn. So my people didn't look too favorably on that. No. And so, but I stopped. I didn't stop. I didn't. I seen the reception that was coming, so I just left it alone. But I continued on. And when I did this, there was one person, and Barbara and I were not friends at this time. I'd met her because she'd worked with the Museum of the Cherokee. So because she was an academic, she was a PhD, I went to visit her. I said, Miss Barbara Duncan, I want to show you something. Do you understand this? And she looked at it, and I didn't even explain it to her. I just let her look at it. And she said, oh, yes, I understand this. I understand what it can do. So that was the beginning. And what I said was, we ran into a problem. We started putting things together, and we could see a pattern. He had upon here a word, I will give you the word, it's Gaga, I'm going. I actually believe it's Gaga, but in time, as time passes, all of us with our own language, we really do not know if there was changed or if there's a difference, but we can only go by what we have been taught and what we hear. So that's what we follow. This is what we heard. This is how Grandma said it. This is how Grandpa said it. This is how my mom and dad pronounce it. So we follow that. So we do not know when a word begins to erode, get shorter. And if you start to speak it and you become, they'll say, I guess, you get real comfortable with each other, you don't have to say a word in its completeness. So this Gaga, which I think is Gaga-E, I'll just use Gaga so you can hear it. You got Gaga, I am going. And if I'm speaking to you, Haga, I'm saying you are going. And if I'm saying someone just left, I'm saying Aga, she's going. Now, so you've heard a G, a H, and a nothing, right? Okay. So in writing in the syllabary, because there's no single sound seen, you got the consonants. You could not see the change. So that told me something. I am a land surveyor. And working out there in the woods, I get to be an Indian, it's cool. My dad used to say to me, he said, think about being a surveyor. He said, he was speaking of himself, he said, who would want to pay a little Indian boy to run around and play in the woods? Because he's a land surveyor, he loved being in the woods. But it showed me something. When I look at a tree, all of you know got a tree, we look at a poplar tree. We look at a pine tree, we got these words. But if you look at those trees, a poplar tree, you look at its leaf, and you look at its bark, and you look at its shape. All of that tells you, and each one of it has that pattern continuously over and over and over. And that's when I begin to look at the language that way. So I thought, now, for it to have been here so long, for it to be here with this Indian mind, there had to be something. So once we begin to line those words up, those patterns, they just appeared. I didn't have to do it, and I don't have to check with anybody because I'm checking with the word. And as the word showed, what I told Barbara, I said, what's going to happen is this, is the language is going to speak to us. The language itself will tell us if we just pay attention to the language. That's what we begin to do. And so as time went on, we begin to see it, and it's like we begin to understand this is how it works. This is why it's doing it. And in the check-in, because of the conjugation, sometimes we have there's no true, well, there is now. There was not a true dictionary. It was just a glossary, a list of words. So what we were able to do, Barbara didn't realize it one day, and Barbara, like she said, she'd been trying for 20 years to learn. So Barbara learned the pattern wonderfully. And one day she said, Willard, I have this word, but it's the wrong word, it's the wrong form. I can't conjugate it. And I said, Barbara, come on. I said, you've been doing this. You know the conjugations. It's there. You know the pattern. She said, yes. I said, what step are you on? She said, the third one, fourth one. I said, go backwards. Don't go down the steps, go up the steps. There it was. Beautiful. Now, for all of us of Native people, we say these words and our language means so much and gives meaning to our life, of who we are, what we are. There's been so much change. I don't really think people understand what this word language means. We use it freely. Any of you here, if you don't, native language is not your first language, we'll say everybody here just went to school learning English. On the day you went to school, you were fluent in English, but you did not understand it. You could not explain it. You had to become educated in it before you could take that word and say, this is what it means. And I ask many people, I will say, tell me what this word means in your language, meaning English. And they'll say, what word? I'll say, water. Water. And they'll tell me, they said, something you drank. Life, liquid. And I said, does your word water mean that? And they think about it for a moment. They say, well, no, doesn't mean that. And then someone will they become very good, and they will tell me, water is H2O. I said, do you know that? Yeah, I know that. And I said, have you seen a molecule of oxygen? Have you seen one of hydrogen? They say no. I said, so what are you telling me then? How do you know what this is? And they begin to think, all right, what I have learned then is I have learned a term for an object. And really, it's a reference point. And so what I've seen with Barbara and looking at this language, when you teach it in the way it's being taught by most people, there's no reference points. You have nothing to build upon, you have nothing to learn. However, when we went to school for English, we were given that. And it's pretty, that's why we're all speaking now, that's why you guys understand me. I may not be speaking the correct English language, I'm sorry, but I only went so far. But what I'm saying is that nobody pays attention. Nobody thinks about it. If you say, I'm happy, I'm walking, even the word happy, I can say I'm happy, and if you tell me you're happy, I don't know how much happy you are. If you say you're sad, I don't know how sad you are. It doesn't tell you that. Now, but if you follow these patterns, and as Duponceau said, from the top of the world to the bottom of the world, in this new world, they call it the new world, we have been here for a long, long time. There's something else you're going to find, if any of you choose to follow and go that far. Our language is old, very, very old. So, of course, it's not going to fit today's language. How much time do I have? Sorry, but it's your fault. But what I'm saying is this: there's an understanding here that nobody's thinking about. I read a book. I'll get over it, but I want to tell you this. I read a book, and the book was, the title of it, I think, was The Rule of Four, and it was about a man whose father had been trying to solve a riddle from somewhere 15 or 1600s. He could not solve the riddle, and so his son had picked it up. He'd seen his father work and in his childhood, kept on working, got older, he passed away, died. And the son he picked it up and he kept going. And so this is what the son, he did solve the problem. The son solved the problem. But this is how he did it. What he did was, he realized you cannot open a 1600 lock with a 21st century key. It will not work. So that's why, that it kind of explains without me saying it, how we came to the grandmother chart. I followed the words. As a land surveyor, I'm a tracker. I followed it. What it was is what it was. I don't argue with anybody. I can't. There's no need to. If you want to see it, you follow the tracks too. And whatever it is, it is. I'll give you a little quick hint of something. All of you, as Native people, have a word for water. And I might ask you, what does it mean? And you might say it means water, right? Okay, in Cherokee, the word we use where I come from is ama, which is very, very strange because before 1800, we didn't have an M in our language. However, the missionaries couldn't explain why we existed. And they asked the elders, they said, who is the smartest, oldest man that you know of, the wisest man? And they said, they thought about it. Because of no written language, you go by memory and stories, which is why stories are wonderful. And so they said, oh, okay. His name was Wasi. And they said, no, we're missionaries now. That they didn't have that UN directive. You're wrong. His name was Moses. So we have the M in our language now, but it's only about 5 words. Only about 5 words. So now let's say, and I have seen documentation, I found papers, and that's why I went to the oldest sources. I thought that the language would be the most pure of that time. It's just a word, so that's why I went backwards. So here you go. This word is awa, originally. Okay, now I'm going to pretend that I know what these sounds mean. And that word says, being unseen. Can you see the water? No, you see through the water. That's the original meaning in the Cherokee language. I thank you very much. I thank Kristen for inviting me. And later on, we're going to have another session. I think we can talk if you wish to talk. Look back at your own language in your own way. Thank you very much.
We have about 8 minutes for questions, if anyone wants to ask any.
Right back there.
I'm very intrigued about my. Excuse me, I'll start over. My name is Ed Ironclad, and I'm from Porcupine, South Dakota. And my Lakota name is Mahbia Maza, which is the same as my last name. And I came here with my wife, partner. She was invited, and I came today. But I wanted to say briefly about water. You know, water is very powerful. And I could really relate to what the gentleman was saying, my relative there. And in Lakota, water is money. And ma is to say, is briefly, ma would be me. And ni would be like what everybody would call sweat lodge, inipi. Ini is to live. So you put those words together, it's like, I want to live, you know, which is very powerful. And I've always really been more, really, as I get older, losing my hair, I really try to, what you were talking about is put words together. What do those words mean? How did they come to be? How did they come to be? And it's really descriptive. But I just wanted to share that with you, you know, that much because, you know, it's really powerful. And you going into the woods, you know, is really, that's the classroom. You know, it's always been, and it's really to me, you know, I go out in the woods myself. But in closing, you know, I just wanted to say that, you know, what comes to mind for me, and I don't know the word for Lakota word for it, to me it would be a celebration of life. Because celebration of life to me is very powerful, and it encompasses everything and everybody. And I look across this crowd here, this group of people here, and I always do that when I go into a group. And what I see older people, I see men, I see women, I see younger people. And to me, that's very good. It feels good because as a people, that's how we were. We learned from each other. We had the old, we didn't really push everybody apart like Western way of doing things is really saying, oh, well, these are men, these are women, these are old, these are young. Everything was together. But I'm going to give this mic back because I can talk all day. And I really want to, you know, thank you for listening. And I just happened to fall on this event here. And it's very powerful to me because it really gives me the strength. And, you know, I want to go back. I want to learn more. My language, you know, the language is very deep, you know, and it's really powerful. And I see it's the way for us to move back to where we are. And when I say language, you know, real quick, I want to share a quick story with you guys here. I've been watching Animal Communicators. If any of you have ever seen that, it's where people talk to animals like, you know, they look at an animal, a horse, a cow, a whale, and they talk, and they tell people what that means. So I was watching that, and then I was telling my son was coming up here, and I was telling him that I was watching it. I was watching it, and there was a story about how this lady who would open up this store, and her little cat would walk out the door, front door, which is a busy street, and she was scared that it was going to get hurt, so she calls in this animal communicator. So basically the communicator puts in the little kitten's mind what could happen if she goes out there, you know. And sure enough, it worked. The cat was walked to the door and just stood at the door and didn't go any further. And my son was telling me, he said, that was interesting because he said that the cat at the house there, he was thinking of, he was going to take a trip, so he's going to put the cat outside because it was a cat he just found, kind of a street cat, but he brought in, took care of it. But he was going to put it outside because he had to leave. And here he looked, and the kittens were gone. The kittens were gone, so he looked all over, and he finally found them. The mother had hidden them away. So that just kind of really reinforced me that I was thinking that cat knew that what he was thinking of doing, and that's why she did what she did. So to tell you the truth, I don't know where I'm going with this, but you know, it's just a part of language, you know, the language of many languages of humans and animals, the language that each of us speaks, and the language of everything, you know, that is around us, you know, that's the language that really, you know, really makes me interesting, because when I make my journey, when I walk, I don't know who I'm gonna meet. I don't know who I'm gonna talk to. You know, I don't know what situation I'm gonna come across. That's a language in itself, you know, and I didn't even plan on being here. I was planning on being back home in South Dakota today, but I'm here taking up your time. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much.
Okay, one last question here. We have 1 minute.
One of the things that Alexei Zucker had mentioned is that there's a lot of pragmatic reasons why people to learn indigenous languages. So my question is, based on your all's opinions, thank you. Based on your professional opinions and experience, what do you think can be done to prevent this pragmatic reasonings from stopping children learning indigenous languages?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, so what we are trying to do in Karelia right now is to restore a fashion to speak language, Karelian language, and it's not easy because already one generation is lost in terms of the language speaking and so on. But researchers say that the language is vital if it's spoken in 3 areas. It's education, media, and also governance. But also internet, I think it's the 4th one. So we're trying to make sure that this Karelian language is spoken in these 4 areas. And since the parents see it somehow, so they start little by little understand that the language is not just the home language, but it is spoken somewhere. And when it's spoken, for example, by politicians in the political sphere, is the most powerful for them to somehow restore this fashion and mode to speak the language. And also, given the small communities, I mentioned one example, this the language house. So this is something which really very powerfully inspired local community to speak, not only in the house, but also in the whole village. So this kind of little project can do the difference. Thank you.
For the longest time, the reason that when among my people, economically, it was at a disadvantage for you to learn your language. At the same time, too, there was a strong spiritual limitation because the Yonega, his religion, if you spoke the language, you could go over into your own spirituality. They did not want you doing that. So they spoke against the ceremonies, they spoke against the dances. And as I said to you, when my uncles would tease me about my hair, they had a different mindset and a different understanding. So what has to happen, if it can happen, we're a long way from 1900. And that's when the boarding schools started really heavy, and we became a different kind of people. But there's one thing that really mattered, and it is the law, in a sense. There's only one great law with all Native people. We can say we want to live within our traditions, and we can say we want to keep on the language and dance and whatever. But with what our limitations were, they did the best that they could, and the best that you could is teach them how to live. So if they had to lose the language so that they could get a good job. I remember back in 1970, if you could not write a correct sentence or know how to punctuate, you didn't get a good job. If you couldn't speak correctly, you didn't get a good job. So that's when it began to drift away. Now, for my people, other people might have been a little longer because according to where they were geographically and how much the community they had been encroached upon. And so all of us have been affected by this. Now, but today, this is America. Everybody, I think, every Indian here has every right and freedom to go and sit with the elder and listen to the stories, listen to the words. We can do that. There's one thing, though. The one thing you can't do, nobody can do this. We can only hope to inspire. But the great law that we all live by is the I want law. If there's not a payoff to us worthy enough of the effort, we will not do it. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. That is the great law. And what will have to be, we have, as Native people, what I've seen is that we're very proud to say what tribe we are. I can jump up and down and scream from my mountaintop, oh yeah, I'm proud, I'm Cherokee. Another person, I'm proud, I'm Sioux, I'm proud, I'm Choctaw, I'm proud, whatever. We can all say that. Oh yeah, I play stickball. You know, I still do that. I eat sochan. I'm very proud of this. But until they have that same pride of saying, I speak my language, then it will not go to that. That's from us. Nobody can make us. That, and somehow or another, what has to be instilled in everybody is to have that pride that you want to speak this language. But remember, it is the great I want law, and we all do live by it. And then that will go back to, as each child comes along, they're individuals. If I have a daughter, she doesn't think I exactly follow my thoughts or belief or wonderment. She lives according to how she wants to, and I must respect that. And that's the real reality for all of us. We can hope that we can give our babies, the next one, grandchildren. Do not let it go. Do not let it die. There might be things in there yet. I think there are. That it once mattered to us so much, and it did have power. Our songs, our dances, our language used to have power. But then we believed in it. I don't know how it's going to how we need to get back to that belief. But that's going to be very individual, your question on that.
Conversation, and I will announce the instructions for the workshops. And I wanted to reflect a little bit on the feeling that this panel gives me, which is yesterday we spent the whole day really talking about the language of the law, and we were, deeply engaged in that discourse. And I think it's really nice as we're moving towards the panels to be in the spirit of Indigenous worldviews and thinking about issues inspired by these languages, and in that spirit. And I appreciate very much the comments of the gentleman in the back who mentioned that he was, ready to go home and do something. And I hope that that's one of the things that we're all taking from this event. Along those lines, we will take a short break and then adjourn to our different workshops. And the idea for the workshops is to take some of this conversation that we had yesterday about implementing the declaration and really make somewhat of a plan for action. Now, the plan for action, and of course each workshop has a moderator who has thought about facilitating the conversation. The plan for action may well build on things that people are already working on together. It may well be short-term, medium-term, long-term. It could be a legal strategy. It could be something that really is more about community or education or media, perhaps all of those things, because we've talked about this being not just a legal movement, but a social movement in many ways toward Indigenous peoples' human rights in the U.S. and, of course, in solidarity with our colleagues and brothers and sisters around the world. So with that, I will just announce which rooms that we'll be in. The Technology and Media workshop will be in room 304. The Climate Change and Environmental Advocacy workshop will be in room 305. Cultural Rights in room 307, so those are all upstairs. Indian Child Welfare in 306. business and human rights in 480, and we added a workshop on language rights that will be here. So if you'd like to continue this conversation with this amazing group of panelists, please do stay here. There are also signs in the hallway if you didn't catch my quick mention. And then finally, we'll reconvene in the Shadden Commons where we had lunch yesterday. Each moderator/reporter will share just a few points that came out of the workshop so that we can all inspire each other and commit to these plans, and then we will truly finish. So thank you all, and thank you again to the panel.